actually. All right, and I'm going to let folks in now. So everyone should be coming in now. And we are also recording. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting. We will begin in a few minutes, just getting everyone admitted and getting ourselves situated. Welcome to the Transformative Climate Communities application workshop. This is for all audiences. So if you're looking to learn more about TCC, this is the room to be in. So folks are still trickling in, but I think we can get started. All right. So before we get started, I first wanted to frame who is in the room. So we pulled this from the data registration, and as you can see, most folks are unfamiliar with TCC, and that's totally okay. Another majority is that folks are somewhat familiar with a TCC application, and some are very familiar. When it comes to grant types, most folks are unsure about what grant type they will be applying for right now, and that's totally fine. We're hoping that this presentation can help you learn more about the different grant types and give you more clarity on which one would be the best for your community. When we look at what organizations you all represent, a majority of you all come from nonprofit and city government backgrounds and organizations. We have folks across the board from all different organization types. And so this is a very diverse room, and we're hoping that you all can use the space not only to learn about TCC, but to also find potential collaboration opportunities. So I'm going to pass it to Jerry, and he will go over these next few slides.
Cool. Can everybody hear me okay? No.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
All right, awesome, thanks. Technical issues all morning. Okay, great. So welcome everybody. Yeah, we'll be going over the agenda here for a second, but before we do, a couple of housekeeping items. Just letting y'all know that the session will be recorded and we will be posting it via the TCC website once it is ready. Also, we have the chat going, seeing some folks sending good morning wishes, so welcome all, welcome all. Feel free to use that to notify us of any tech issues that you may have. We will have staff monitoring the chat. And then speaking of monitoring the chat, feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation. As mentioned, we'll have folks online answering as many as we can in real time. If not, we can also leave some of these unanswered questions towards the end of the session. And if we really can't get to the slew of questions that we may get today, we can always answer those via email if we can't get to them in the discussion. But we hope there will be plenty of opportunities. Again, we'll have plenty of time for conversation. So with that said, let's go over the agenda. Today, as Jess mentioned, we will be talking about, we'll be giving a brief discussion and program overview on TCC, including goals and principles, as well as talking to important deadlines for the application process. The application technical assistance team is also on this call and will be giving an overview of the application TA provided for round 5. And then towards the end, we'll, like I said, leave it open for questions and have some breakout sessions where we can, break out and have smaller discussions if needed. Great. With that said, let's go on to the next slide. Let's talk a little bit about the Strategic Growth Council. So the California Strategic Growth Council is a cabinet-level committee tasked with coordinating state agency activities aimed at supporting the planning and development of sustainable communities. The mission of the council is to coordinate and work collaboratively with public agencies, communities, and stakeholders to achieve sustainability, equity, economic prosperity, and quality of life for all Californians. Now, furthermore, the California Strategic Growth Council is committed to achieving racial equity in our work, in which all people of California can live in healthy, thriving, and resilient communities, regardless of race. Next slide, please. So the Transformative Climate Communities is a program under the Strategic Growth Council, and we will go over the history a little bit, and then we'll go into the goals of the program and overview. So next slide. So the TCC program was created through legislation to fund community-led climate resilient development and infrastructure plans that provide multiple benefits. So the program vision for transformation is centered on a place-based approach with a focus on funding neighborhood plans in the most disadvantaged communities in the state. Also, we'd like to recognize that the term disadvantaged often overlooks the many assets and existing efforts in communities. And we will use that term in this presentation as it's derived from the California Environmental Protection Agency that defines disadvantaged communities as census tracts with high pollution and socioeconomic burdens. Next slide. So the California Strategic Growth Council administers the Transformative Climate Communities program in partnership with the California Department of Conservation. We have our colleagues from DOC on the call who will be taking on some of these slides in a bit. You'll get to meet them. TCC funds community-driven proposals, as mentioned, and is structured to provide existing residents and stakeholders with the tools and resources to drive change. TCC makes significant investments to support the deployment of multiple integrated climate strategies and projects carried out through strong partnerships at the local level and with the state. And you see here some of the investments to date, including, so a lot of this work is tied to also greenhouse gas reduction funds, and that's why we have a total there for 261,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases reduced thus far. Next slide, please. So for round 5 of TCC, we have a new available grant opportunity, and we administer both implementation, project development, and planning grants, with project development grants being the new funding source for this round. Planning and implementation are very similar to years past, and we will talk more in detail to the project development grant opportunities. The implementation grants are round 5. There are 3 awards of 29. We're starting backwards here. I don't know why I did that. So let's start with planning grants. If we look at that graph, we have 3 awards of $300,000 each. They support planning grants, support planning activities, and as we mentioned, disadvantaged communities. Planning grants also prepare communities for future TCC grants or other resilience implementation funding. And then these carry a 2-year grant term with an option to extend on a case-by-case basis. The project development grants, which are new, we have multiple awards this year for this round of up to $5 million each. Pre-development grants fund pre-development activities. They prioritize disadvantaged unincorporated communities, tribal communities, and then past planning grant awardees and past implementation grant applicants. The priority here is given to disadvantaged unincorporated communities, and here these carry a 2-year grant term. And then finally, we have the implementation grants. For round 5, there are 3 awards at $29.5 million each, funding project proposals that include multiple coordinated projects aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and achieving community benefits. These are often a 5-year project completion period, followed by a 1 year of performance and outcome evaluation. The question that we get asked often is, do you have to do these in order? And no, you do not. If you're interested in applying, you can apply at any stage of these. Next slide, please. The next slide shows current grantees up to round 4. These are implementation grantees, and you can see the list here of awardees. We have follow-up on the next slide, we have the planning grantees that have been awarded to date. And you can see that list there of folks. These are all available on our website if you need further info on these, including background and information on their projects. So with that, we went over the overview and some of the goals of the program. I'll toss it over to Jacob Byrne, who will be talking to program principals for TCC. Jacob.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar today. I'm going to actually switch off my video so that I can make sure you all hear me all right. And we're going to be talking about a lot of details today about the application process. But before we launch into those details about the application process, I want to just step back and focus on the TCC program as a whole and the principles of that program to make sure that we have a really strong foundation of what we'll all be working towards through this application process. Most of what I'll be talking about today is specific to the implementation grants, but a lot of the visioning and the core concepts are also going to be shared by the planning grants and project development grants. We can move on to the next slide. All right, so Jerry talked us through a little bit about the legislation that created the TCC program, and I just want to pause here for a moment and talk about what that means when we get to the implementation of these grants. And really fundamentally, the TCC program is about bringing people in your community together to create a multi-project suite of investments where different projects are brought together to create a more sustainable neighborhood that benefits the folks that are living in that neighborhood and does so in a transformative way that really creates and sustains partnerships in your community. Now, to accomplish those goals, the first step along that process is to create a community vision and start setting up collaborative structures, which are presented on the next slide. So what you'll want to do as you start this application process is bring together residents, stakeholders, different partners, community-based organizations or local government agencies as applicable, bring them together around the table and start talking about a vision for transformation for your community. What does your community need to be more sustainable and more resilient to climate change? That will be your vision, kind of your guiding light through this process. As you're talking about that vision and creating it, you'll also start standing up collaborative structures. And so that will be to formalize these kind of relationships that you're creating through that visioning process. So for instance, you'll be entering into agreements with those different stakeholders to kind of formalize decision-making processes. These collaborative stakeholder structures will be used if your grant is awarded to help troubleshoot issues during your implementation of your grant. And they'll really be kind of the central kind of core of the grant as we move forward that unites all the different stakeholders, partners, and residents. Jess, if you can advance the slide or just click next, just wanted to share a picture we've got here of some of the team that did the visioning and created the collaborative stakeholder structure for our round 3 implementation grant in Oakland. As you can see, just tons of people involved in that process, and really it does take a whole village to create the vision that will be at the heart of your application. Once you've got that vision in place, then we can start talking about the projects that you'll be completing during implementation, and that's on the next slide. So to try to give you all some flexibility in implementing different projects that fit your community, the way that the TCC program is set up for implementation grants is that we offer a kind of a menu of options for different projects that are all grouped under strategies. So this slide presents the strategies that are available within the TCC implementation grant, and each of these strategies has projects that you can select as fundable elements under the grant. So let's take an example of that real quick. So let's say in your visioning process, your community members say that they want more green space in their community. What you would do during the application process is take a look at the urban greening strategy and take a look about what fundable elements or fundable projects within urban greening might suit your community. That could, for instance, be street tree planting throughout the community. You might also have a park that maybe needs more new play structures, revitalized bathrooms, or stormwater infrastructure. All of those would be different projects within the urban greening strategy, and each of the strategies that it's bulleted on the screen is similarly structured. Every application does not need to include projects from every one of these strategies. You're going to pick the strategies that work best to move your vision forward and that work best to serve your community. So that's the projects, what you'll really be implementing during the TCC implementation grant. If we move on to the next slide, we'll start talking about transformative elements, which are required for each and every grant, each and every implementation grant. These transformative elements really help to stitch together those different project types and make sure that the projects work cohesively in your community to achieve that kind of goal of transformation. And some of the key ways that those operate is to make sure that the residents that are living in your community right now are the ones that benefit from this investment. So that happens through displacement avoidance, making sure that folks in the neighborhood aren't displaced through these investments. We also require that every implementation grant includes a workforce development component. Those workforce development components can often be stitched within each of the project types. So hopefully that the residents in the neighborhood can gain some marketable skills, participate in some of the projects that your community has selected, and build their careers. The last element on this slide here is community engagement. Again, that's stitched through every single one of your projects and the application phase even. And what we're looking for with community engagement is making sure that the stakeholders you're engaging, the residents you're engaging during the application phase are really continue to be engaged throughout the implementation of the project. And that creates a lasting relationship with the residents and the decision makers in your community to make sure that these investments are sustained over the long term. So there's three transformative elements displayed on this slide. The next slide has the remaining three transformative elements that are again required for each application. And Jess, you can move ahead the slide. Thank you. So all of the TCC implementation grants are required to include climate adaptation and resilience to make sure that these investments are adapted and resilient to climate change. Each implementation grant will also be required to do some data collection. That is a funded activity under the grants. We'll provide grant funds for that. Typically, that's accomplished by a third-party evaluation partner, perhaps like an educational institution. That will help us monitor the successes of the grant as well as improve the grant program over time. And the last transformative element here is a requirement that leverage funding be brought to the table for implementation grants specifically. So for those implementation grants, 50% of the total grant award must be matched by leverage funds that are also brought to the table. There's more details about what qualifies as leverage funds in the grant guidelines, and really more details about all of this in the grant guidelines. So with that, we can move on to the next slide. So we've talked about the vision, project framework, transformative elements, and I want to kind of unite those a little bit and talk about these key features that run through all of those different elements of the TCC program. So we want to make sure that the TCC application is place-based, it's accessible to the people in your neighborhood who are coming to the table and creating this application and telling you what their vision for transformation is. That often allows these different, because you're bringing so many different groups to the table, it often allows you to create an integrated suite of projects that really help build each other up and share connections, share resources. Another way that the integration occurs is through these catalytic partnerships that are achieved through bringing these different groups of people together, funding their activities together, sharing resources. Often we get people in the same room who have never worked together, but can really multiply their effects within the community. And then finally, we do see that these TCC investments are catalytic investments in the community. So we often see that because of their involvement in TCC, organizations are able to build their capacity, reach out for additional grant funds, and really multiply the effect of these grant funds within their community. So I think we've kind of gone through the vision, the key features of the TCC projects. And I really want to, just make sure that we keep that in mind as we move forward through some of the details of the application process today and in the coming months. So with that, Jess, I think we can move on to the next slide. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate that. So at this point, we're hoping you're starting to formulate a proposal that aligns with TCC's programs and principles and getting better clarity of the purpose of TCC. So in this next section, we will be looking at the application overview and timeline and describing the eligibility requirements, walk through the key application components and requirements, and then provide an overview of the application timeline, as well as technical assistance opportunities. So who is eligible to apply? For all grant types, applications must include a minimum of 2 applicants, including a public agency as a co-applicant. As described before, a core component of the program is the collaborative stakeholder structure. And so a range of entities are eligible, but no single entity on their own will be competitive. Eligible applicants include, but are not limited to, the ones on this slide. And the lead applicant must be the one that demonstrates sufficient financial and administrative capacity to administer the grant. As discussed before, TCC is a place-based program with investments concentrated in a single neighborhood. So these are the project and planning area requirements for incorporated areas and tribal territories. So applicants must define a project area that is contiguous and covers up to 5 square miles for implementation grants. And if you are a tribe in a rural area as defined by our guidelines, your project area can be up to 10 square miles, which I will talk about more in the next slide. Here are the requirements for areas that are located in incorporated areas and federally recognized tribal territories. So 51% of the project area must be within a disadvantaged census tract, which is a top 25% of Cal screen, or within a federally recognized tribal territory. The other 49% needs to meet the above criteria or be in a low-income community per AB 1550. So we have a mapping tool that will help with determining your project area, which we'll also talk about in a couple slides. This is the project and planning area requirements for disadvantaged unincorporated communities. So for the eligibility for these communities, it differs slightly. For implementation grant applicants, the project area must be contiguous up to 10 square miles. And this is meant to accommodate the unique development patterns that occur in these communities. And in order to address the lack of data representation in these communities, we are also accepting 4 methods to determine eligibility in unincorporated areas. A community only needs to meet any one of these 4 criteria. The first is being located within the top 25% of disadvantaged census tracts per Cal screen and be designated as a disadvantaged unincorporated community by the local agency formation commission. The second is the project or planning area is in an eligible location per the TCC mapping tool. Third, the project area is within the planning area of a previous TCC planning grant. And then the final option is to self-identify as a disadvantaged unincorporated community and justify that designation with local data that identifies population characteristics and density at a neighborhood level. The other 49% is similar to incorporated areas where it's the above criteria or be in a low-income community per AB 1550. Again, we have a mapping tool to help with this, as well as technical assistance providers. And then I'll pass it on to Jerry to talk about the TCC mapping tool.
Yes, thanks, Jess. So yeah, this slide shows a screenshot of the TCC mapping tool, which is also available on our website. Let me see if I could drop this into the multitask here and make sure I send the right link. This is the link to the mapping tool. This is essentially set up as a resource to let y'all know about the layers that are combined within the TCC mapping tool. In the last round 4, we expanded eligibility to disadvantaged unincorporated communities and tribal communities. So you'll see those layers in this image here. Layers 4 and 5 will help identify rural communities and tribal communities that are eligible. So yeah, about resources, we also on the website have a 13-minute video tutorial that we've been told is particularly helpful to walk folks through the tool and to help you identify potential project areas. Also, as mentioned, the TA providers here on this call will work with applicants interested from implementation grants and those from rural and tribal communities to help with identifying eligible project areas. So yeah, so we'll leave it at that, and then we'll go into the next slide, which again just shows it's a repeat of the slides we discussed earlier. If you can, next slide for me, Jess, or I may be frozen. Am I frozen? Oh, I see movement. All right. So this is, again, just a reminder of the awards that are available for this round, just to refresh that. And the next slide also talks to some of the components that we have in the grant types. Next slide, please. I might have a delay. There we go. So here you see the difference in the components for the different types of grants. As you can see, the implementation grant comes with most of these components, where the project development grant and then planning grant follow that table, with planning grant having less components. So, yeah. So here in this slide, we're talking about another important element to the program are the policy priorities. So we have several policy priorities here, as you can see, that impact eligibility and evaluation. Some of them are required, and then some involve and incentive points. So applicants must demonstrate that residents in the proposed TCC project area have existing access or develop plans for basic water supply and wastewater services, as well as transit connectivity to regional service hubs and major job centers through affordable, clean transportation projects. Applicants can allocate up to 10% of TCC grant funds towards meeting the water and wastewater requirement, and can meet the other requirements through TCC funded projects. Technical assistance providers will support applicants in meeting these requirements through their proposed projects. Also, applicants must demonstrate that TCC proposals are consistent with all relevant land use plans, including climate action plans, zoning, building density requirements, design guidelines, applicable goals, policies, and programs. This consistency is demonstrated by submittal of a letter from the local jurisdiction's planning department or public works department describing the proposed TCC project's consistency with all relevant plans. Applicants from cities with planned high-speed rail stations along the initial Silicon Valley to Central Valley line must include in the TCC project area multimodal connectivity to the high-speed rail station area, and if there are any proposed affordable and mixed income housing, its connectivity and accessibility to the high-speed rail station area. There are 2 additional policy incentives for pro-housing and air pollution reduction and mitigation, which can earn applicants an additional 5 points each. TCC will provide incentives to applicants that propose actions or include existing meaningful efforts to reduce localized point sources of pollution in their project areas and jurisdictions. TCC is required by legislation to provide incentive points to applicants in jurisdictions that receive the Department of Housing and Community Development's pro-housing designation, which incentivizes policies that would facilitate sustainable housing production and the reduction of vehicle miles traveled. Tribal communities will automatically get full pro-housing incentive points, and the Department of Housing and Community Development's pro-housing designation can earn any jurisdiction these points. Finally, there are example policies for both incentives listed in the guidelines appendices, which can earn applicants these points. And we'll go on to scoring criteria. Jess, I think that's you.
You're on mute. Thank you for that. So each application will be evaluated based on its vision and objectives, demonstrated capacity to implement the proposal, and transformative elements. We're looking for a few things. So does the proposal align with TCC objectives? Does it comprehensively describe how it aligns with community needs? Does it embed the transformative elements in its proposals and have capacity? Are the partnerships diverse and strong, among other things? For the project development, as we mentioned before, disadvantaged unincorporated community applicants, tribal applicants, previous implementation grant applicants, and previous planning grant grantees are prioritized, with disadvantaged unincorporated communities having the most priority. The application thresholds and full scoring criteria are listed in the round 5 guidelines, and there are also checklists to get you on, to guide you on the program threshold requirements. So this is the application timeline for round 5. So some applications some dates that have already passed is we released the draft guidelines. They've been adopted by the Strategic Growth Council, and the NOFA was posted on March 8th along with the application materials. Starting on March 14th, we have had TCC office hours every Tuesday, 2 to 4 p.m. The first hour is designated for 15-minute appointments, and then the second hour is drop-in appointments. And then on March 22nd to 23rd, which is today and tomorrow, we are having the audience-specific online application workshops. This next deadline, which is March 31st, is an important one. So the application initiation form is due for implementation grant applicants. So the application initiation form is designed to first collect interest and contact information for the application submission folders, and then to connect eligible applicants to technical assistance providers. It is required for all applicants, but filling out an application form does not represent a commitment to apply on part of the applicant. So if you are interested, you should still fill out this form. All implementation grant applicants are required to receive free third-party technical assistance to ensure that questions are answered consistently, feedback is given equitably, and greenhouse gas estimates are completed uniformly. And requests for application technical assistance may be submitted up until March 31st for implementation grant applicants. And then after March 31st, requests for TA will only be accepted if there is space. And then for the May 1st, 2023, pre-proposals are required for implementation grant applicants, and that is the deadline. It will help the applicant TA providers and SGC assess whether applicants are on track to meet the threshold requirements by the application deadline, and to identify areas where additional support is needed. But the pre-proposal will not influence application evaluation. Again, that's only for the implementation grant applicants. For July 3rd, the application initiation form is due for planning and project development grant applicants. And again, it is required for all applicants. August 1st is the deadline for final application submission. And then between August 1st and December, we will be reviewing the applications and giving recommendations in December to the council, where the round 5 TCC awards will be adopted by the council. And then for the application initiation form, one last note: tribal and disadvantaged unincorporated community applicants may ask for an extension by emailing TCC. So I will pass it on to our technical assistance providers to give us a background on what services they provide and all that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jess. And if you could move on to the next slide, I can introduce myself and introduce my role on the team. My name is Riley O'Brien. I'm a senior analyst with Estolano Advisors. And Estolano Advisors is the lead coordinator for the third-party technical assistance team for TCC. Our firm has been in that role since the first round of TCC, so we've really seen this program evolve over the years and have a lot of experience with the TCC program. And just to give an idea of what technical assistance has provided in the past and can provide during round 5. As Jess mentioned earlier, all implementation grant applicants are required to work with our team, the SGC sponsored technical assistance providers, as we will be able to help with various services, including assessing the readiness of your proposal. And in the case of the implementation grant, the pre-proposal, we can help provide guidance, help with brainstorming, outlining for your narrative portions of your application. We can also help review those, proofread those, and offer suggestions. We are not able to write any narrative materials from scratch. We don't have capacity to serve as full grant writers, but we can help guide the grant writing process and support the grant writing process. We can also support with partnership development. If you are a nonprofit looking to partner with a local government or vice versa, we can help guide you in the right direction, suggest who you might want to work with and what that partnership structure might look like. And similar to the narrative guidance and review, we can provide guidance on your overall work plan and budget, as well as the work plan and budget for each project. And then last but not least, which we'll talk a bit more about soon, our team can help with the greenhouse gas emission reduction quantification process, which is an important component of the implementation grant application. And just to reiterate what Jess mentioned earlier, all implementation grant applicants must complete the application initiation form by Friday, March 31st, which is next Friday. That said, tribal applicants and applicants from unincorporated communities can request additional time by emailing the TCC email address. So this is all for implementation grant applicants. What I've mentioned, again, all implementation grant applicants are required to work with our team. But moving on to the next slide, we'll describe how we also provide assistance to planning grant and project development grant applicants, specifically from tribal and or unincorporated communities. So if you are applying for one of these grants and you're not part of a tribal community or an unincorporated community, you're applying in that case with a city government, you're unfortunately not eligible to work with our technical assistance team. But as Jess mentioned, there are those TCC office hours as well as the TCC email address where you can obtain assistance. And so for those planning grant and project development grant types, our team can offer similar assistance, assessment of the readiness of your proposed planning activities or project development activities. We can help guide and review the narrative, guide and review the development of the budget, the work plan, help with partnership development. And there is no deadline. This is actually a typo. This should say that there is a July 3rd deadline. So you don't need to complete the form by March 31st, but we do encourage applicants who would like technical assistance who are from these tribal and or unincorporated communities to fill out the survey when you are ready, or fill out the application initiation form rather. If you do need additional time beyond that July 3rd deadline, similarly, you can request an extension to that timeline. So moving on to the next slide, just at a high level, the technical assistance timeline, these are really the main milestones that we build the technical assistance work plan around. So these are related to the overall timeline, kind of components of the overall timeline for the TCC application. The key difference here, the key component related to technical assistance are the technical assistance kickoff calls. So we start with a 30-minute intake call, and then we'll have a follow-up conversation, which we call a kickoff call in late March, or more likely for most of you in April of this year, to really learn more about your proposed application, your potential partners, and to actually pair you with a dedicated technical assistance provider, an individual, and colleagues who can help provide specialized support and provide sort of weekly check-ins depending on the work plan that we all agree upon. So moving on to the next slide, I did want to note that while I am with Estolano Advisors, we do have a large team of technical assistance providers that we oversee and work very closely with. And so there are 3 lead technical assistance providers. Estolano Advisors is one of them. The other 2 are CivicWell and ERA. And these 3 lead TA providers, one of those organizations will be paired with any eligible TA recipient. And then at that point, you'll be coordinating directly with that organization. They each have different specialties. ERA has more experience working with sort of larger infrastructure projects. Estolano Advisors has experience working on workforce development in particular. And then CivicWell also has extensive experience working with tribal governments and rural communities in California. And then we are supported by a variety of subject matter experts. So enterprise community partners help support housing development and housing policy, particularly the equitable housing strategy and neighborhood development strategy of the implementation grant. CDRG, Community Development Resources Group. They are the lead on the greenhouse gas emission quantification. And then we have California Coalition for Rural Housing, which helps serve as a advisor to rural communities focused on housing, as well as tribal communities, given their experience with tribes. California Relief provides some additional support for the urban greening component of the implementation grant, as well as related proposals in the planning and project development grants. And then the last but not least is Farallon Strategies, and they provide support on climate policies, on other grant types. So we do have a variety of technical assistance providers that are supporting our team. So moving on to our next slide, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Anna, to walk through the technical assistance process in more detail.
Thanks, Riley. So I'll go ahead and provide a brief overview of the technical assistance process, what that looks like from the intake and onboarding all the way through the application deadline. So the first step here, as Riley mentioned, it would be to complete the application initiation form. And again, this is for the TA team to get to know a little bit more about what grant type you're looking to apply to, if there's any details from your projects that you can relay, sort of for us to start to get to know more about your TCC proposal interest. And we use this information to kind of see who's interested in a TCC grant application, and from there, we then move on to the second step, which is we will contact each respondent to schedule an intake call. And in this intake call, we discuss the form responses that were submitted in that form, as well as eligibility requirements. So going over the eligibility requirements, depending on what grant type you're looking to apply for. And we will also provide a brief overview of the TA process, as well as any TA needs that each applicant may have. I do want to note that some folks here may have attended the pre-application workshops that we hosted earlier this year, and we did have a pre-application survey. So if you completed that pre-application survey, and we also are asking you to complete the application initiation form to really indicate your interest in moving forward with an application. And noting that we've also started to reach out to any folks who completed that pre-application survey. And for step 3, once we've done the intake calls, basically our team comes back, and depending on like how those intake calls and the information we gathered, we use that information to match you to a TA provider. As Riley mentioned, we have 3 TA lead providers. Depending on what projects you're looking at, what grant type, the communities you're serving, we will pair you with one of those who will lead you through the whole application process all the way through the grant deadline by providing check-in meetings, application material review, and other services as needed as well. So we go to the next slide. So once you are matched with the TA provider, what we will do is host a kickoff call. Again, this is most likely going to be starting in April. But this is again to kind of learn more about your grant proposal, review the application timeline, go over any TA priorities, go over the Q&A protocol that we have. So if there are any questions that come up during the application period, how we will be able to coordinate with that, as well as provide a local TA provider opportunity, which we will go more into in a couple minutes. And from here, basically after that, once we've gone through the kickoff call, we've learned more about your partners, your projects, we will be working with that lead TA provider through August 1st, the proposal deadline. And again, this is going to look different for each applicant, but depending on any needs, this is the space for you to work with the TA. So we go to the next slide. So here's an overview of some of the technical assistance services that we provide. Again, some of these are only applicable to the implementation grants, such as the GHG quantification. But in general, we can help assist with reviewing guidelines, answering any questions you might have with the guidelines, mapping assistance for getting those project planning areas together, doing a review of the narratives for the application components, looking at your projects and or planning activities, checking eligibility, and also working on some of the other application components. And then we go to the next slide. In addition, we provide a work plan. So the TA provider will work with each applicant team and give them a work plan template. And this work plan template is a kind of like a guide to help identify specific tasks, deadlines, and who is responsible to getting responsible parties for each of the different tasks. It's basically a work plan to help guide applicants in order to ensure that we have all application materials and components in time ready for the deadline. So the applicant will be responsible for populating this template and submitting an individualized work plan to the TA provider. And again, each TA provider lead can work specifically with the applicant to ensure that we have this. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Juan, who will go over a little bit over the GHG process.
Thank you, Ana. Juan Torres here with ARUP. And as Riley mentioned, I'm part of the larger TA team as one of the lead TA providers. And in here, I would like to have a quick overview of the GHG emission reduction quantification process, which, I mean, the main objective of this is to support or the support provided is to report the benefit as the benefits estimated for the reduction greenhouse emissions or GHG gas emissions. And well, this process is conducted through the quantification methodologies approved by the California Air Resources Board, and the specific process changes depending on the type of project. And this is a very important part of the application process as it is fully aligned with the program objectives. And also, as Ana and Riley were highlighting, this is also a qualifiable element of the implementation grant. This process provides 20 points of the application process, and as Jess mentioned at the beginning, as part of the objectives and vision kind of scoring of the implementation grant. So it's very important to keep track of this. And the overall process for this estimation is that the TA provider or the applicant will need to fill a GHG intake form that will be provided by the GHG provider, and then based on that form, a profile will be created. And once that profile is created, the scoring process will be able to be conducted, and these profile will be modifiable as the application process changes, and maybe the potential projects that are being qualifiable changes. So this is going to be a real-time tool that will assess this process. The TA provider in charge of these will be CDRG, and they will be on top of this process. Next slide, please. And I will pass it on here to Riley.
Yes, thank you so much, Juan. Yes, just to recap what Juan said at the end, it is CDRG that leads the greenhouse gas emission reduction quantification, but you will still be working directly with one of the lead organizations, whether that's ARIP, Estolano Advisors, or CivicWell during that process. So make sure to always keep your lead TA provider in the loop if you are, especially an implementation grant applicant, but that applies to any TA recipient. And I would like to close out this section on technical assistance by describing a unique opportunity for local technical assistance that can actually go beyond some of the services that our team, the statewide team, can provide. So SGC does provide some limited funding for local community-based organization TA providers. And those TA providers can actually offer some additional services beyond what we can provide, including facilitation and engagement, grant writing services, identification of key stakeholders within and around the community, as well as helping with some of the other areas that the statewide team can help with, such as administrative coordination and partnership development. Moving on to the next slide, we can go through some of the basic criteria for bringing on a local TA provider. So there is a requirement that the local TA provider is a nonprofit entity that has some expertise and knowledge of the project area, as well as experience working with the priority populations in that project area. So that includes low-income communities, communities of color, and other historically under-resourced communities. And the really important thing here is that the local TA provider, in order to receive the funding to provide technical assistance, the TA provider needs to be interested in helping with the application, but not interested or not able to commit to serving on the applicant team and therefore committing to receiving the grant. So another way of thinking about this, if let's say your community is applying for an implementation grant and there's a local organization that does not have maybe the capacity or not is not ready to commit to a full 5-year implementation grant, but they want to help the community receive that funding, they would be a great fit for this local TA provider role. And so moving on to the next slide. As far as the process of identifying these local TA providers, this is something that will come up in your TA intake call, and then more substantially likely in the TA kickoff call, so that follow-up call with the TA provider you'll be paired with. So if you are interested in this option and there's an organization you have in mind, you should recommend that organization to your TA provider, to your lead statewide TA provider. And then our team, along with SGC, can approve the local TA provider subject to the funding availability. But I will note that the funding available is pretty substantial this round in particular. It is at least several $1,000s, and we're still confirming the final criteria and the final maximum amount. But the organization could receive at least a few $1,000s for this application round, and potentially several $1,000s to help with the application. So moving on to our final slide here, I did want to just provide some TA contact information. If you're interested in learning more about the technical assistance process and more about what we recommend to to do to kind of start your application. First of all, going to the technical assistance website on the TCC website is the first step, and filling out that application initiation form, if you haven't already done so, should be your next step. That is the fastest way to reach us, but if you've already filled out that form and haven't heard anything for whatever reason, or if you do have any specific questions or maybe urgent questions at this point, you can email any of us who spoke today at the email addresses listed below. I can also put these in the chat for you all, and we look forward to working with you and supporting some really great round 5 TCC applications. So with that, I'll turn it back over to SGC. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Jerry will be going over some round 4 case studies. So I'll pass it over to him.
Fantastic.
Oh, Jerry, we're having a hard time hearing you. It says you're not on mute, but yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Oh, it cut out again. Yeah. But I can present on this one until Jerry gets back online. But so this is the County of San Diego. They won a planning grant last round. They are a rural community in San Diego. Their proposal was called Spring Valley Seeds, so Sustainable Environments and Engaged Development Strategies. As you can see in the planning grant map, as we were mentioning, you know, it follows the criteria met, including that AB 1550 low income criteria. And then it is its own unique shape. It doesn't have to be a square. We get that question a lot, like, does it have to be, you know, a certain shape? But it doesn't. It follows along, you know, what community they want to serve and what makes sense for their community. They had several co-applicants here. And again, that speaks to the collaborative stakeholder structure that we're trying to promote, of just having folks from different backgrounds and really tapping into their community expertise and treating it as, you know, the expertise that it is. So I'm gonna see if Jerry, if you're able.
Does this work?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Awesome, great, fantastic. I lost the thread, Jess, but looking at the slide here, looking at the County of San Diego. So yeah, just wanted to show you all the round 4 awardees, just as samples and examples, and to get some gears turning and juices flowing and all the other things that are synchronized with ideas. Here we have the planning grantees. This is an unincorporated community, the County of San Diego. Also, thank you, Stephanie Rambo, for your tech support on chat. I love it. Yeah, so here's an example. You see the project area in an unincorporated community. You see their co-applicants for this application. Again, this is a planning grant and the award amount of $300,000 for round 4. Next slide, please. We have in our, as we mentioned earlier, in the expansion to rural and tribal communities, we had the tribal community of Chicken Ranch Rancheria awarded one of our awardees for a planning grant. Yeah, so theirs is, you see their project area here. Their project is Transformative Community Planning for Health and Safety. You see their co-applicants and then the award amount of $217,000. Next, we'll show a couple of the there were 3 planning grant awards. We'll have 2 slides here. We won't show them all just for time, but just wanted to note, you know, the differences in the in the work, as we showed in that table a while ago, the components of an implementation grant, just to, you know, have those 2 differences side by side. And here you can see this is an implementation grant for South LA. The award amount you can see there, million with leverage funding. Then you could see their projects here that they have outlined, including the transformative plans that we talked about. So yeah, these are more detailed in nature, and they have clearly more elements. The next slide we have is for Richmond Rising, which is also a round 4 grantee. And again, you could see the amounts awarded, including the slew of projects that they have for this project area, including a very detailed project map here. So anyway, yeah, just throwing those out, and all this information is available on the website. For really detailed information, encourage you all to look at the staff report that was submitted for the recommended awards, which has really detailed information on what these projects look like, as a good resource for y'all. With that, we'll toss it to Jess, who will talk to next steps, and then we'll open it up for some questions. And seeing a lot of questions coming in, appreciate those. Keep them coming through the chat, and looks like we're answering them as best as we can. But if we miss one, feel free to copy it and then put it back in the chat in case we miss the thread. Awesome, Jess.
Great, thanks, Jerry. And yes, I also just want to note that I will be sending a follow-up email with some of the links that we mentioned. So don't worry if you all haven't gotten them. So for the next steps, as we've been mentioning again and again, because it is really important, fill out the application initiation form. For the March 31st, that is the due date for implementation grant applicants, and then July 3rd is the due date for planning and project development grant applicants. Again, this form is required for all applicants, and it does not represent a commitment to apply. Secondly, we do have TCC application office hours every Tuesday, 2 to 4. We recognize that this is, more high level, and you may have more specific questions. And so that's why we have those office hours every Tuesday. So the first hour will be designated for 15-minute pre-registered appointments. In my follow-up email, I'll send the Calendly link where you can sign up for those. And then from 3 to 4 p.m. is drop-in, and no registration is required. This information is also available on our application materials website. So we are having some technical issues with the breakout session. So right now we're going to start with doing some Q&A here. Jacob and Jerry will be handling the Q&A, and if we can get the breakout room started, we'll move on to that. But continue to drop your questions in the chat, and Jacob, if you have any that you think would be great for the entire audience to hear.
Yeah,
Great.
sure. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Jerry.
Jacob.
Just wanted to share we're recording this presentation today, so we'll definitely be making the recording available. I'm still waiting on an answer if the slide deck itself will be made available. So once we know that, I'll post it in the chat or give a shout out to you all again.
Yes, the recording, I'll actually stop the recording now since we're moving on to Q&A, and then I will send the slide deck around as well.